I was first introduced to Guston's paintings in 1994 by my printmaking professor, the late Tom Sewell. Tom noticed that I was continually drawing a self-portrait wearing a Klan hood, and he asked me if I knew the work of Philip Guston. I said no, and he let me borrow a book on Philip Guston's paintings. The images blew my mind, and I couldn't believe that there was another artist out there dealing with the Klan. My investigation on the subject started in the year earlier, in the spring of 1993. I was a 19-year-old student at Paris Junior College in Paris, Texas. I was given a photo assignment to create a psychological self-portrait. I just learned of Max Ernst, and I considered myself to be an amateur surrealist, so I dug into my own nightmares to fuel the portrait. Not only that, I dug past my own subconscious fears and tapped into the fears of my parents and my grandparents about navigating life in Northeast Texas, a proudly racist area of the country. I invented a character of vengeance, a ghost of a slain black man wielding a hammer as his weapon of choice. After this photo assignment, I had enough imagery to last several years, and I began to draw and paint new images based on the photograph. I'm still using that character, and his name is Lloyd. 2 decades later, in 2014, I decided that I wanted to re-engage with Guston's Klan figure in a more direct way. I asked the question, what would happen if my superhero alter ego, Torpedo Boy, was to meet up with Philip Guston's alter ego, the bumbling Klansman painter? What resulted was a 45-panel comic strip called Step and Screw. Each panel of the strip broke down into 2 parts, a straightforward, whimsical picto-narrative about Torpedo Boy being lured into a house full of Klansmen to change a light bulb, and secondly, a written calendar highlighting the 120-year-long lynching history of Paris, Texas, the town in which I was raised. The coupling of the whimsical Klan forms with the lynching data helped me to unlock a dormant dialogue about Guston's true intent in pushing the Klansman imagery into the public eye. A dialogue about white complacency and complicity. The comic also gave birth to a series of paintings which mostly centered around an image of Torpedo Boy receiving an object from the Klansman. This is an excerpt from the comic I call The Exchange, or the moment of transference. The initial comic panel has the Klansman offering a light bulb. Of course, this gesture is as much about me receiving wisdom from Philip Guston, a mentor long gone, as it is about 2 characters entering into a deadly, or at the very least, humiliating contract. Each new painting in the series features a new object being offered to Torpedo Boy. An apple, a star, a severed head. In each case, the conversation changes accordingly. The conversation between the Klansman and Torpedo Boy is carved out of the surface of the painting, and the words are only revealed upon close inspection. Guston found a way to talk about his existential predicament by confronting dangerous and sometimes vulnerable subjects. Like Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor, Guston transformed his demons into something useful, something relatable, oftentimes through the employ of a dark humor. In the mid-1990s, I was a hopeful cartoonist, and I identified some relation to comics in Guston's paintings. I was happy to recently find out that Guston also produced his own comic strips when he was young. I fell in love with the way Guston modified his forms, adjusting their meaning with organic logic. For instance, look at the painting called Tall Book from 1968, and his paintings of buildings and cities, also from 1968. One can see these forms morphing back and forth into one another, making a mockery of scale in the process. The same can be said of his series of untitled shoe paintings, which got taller and progressively pointier until they eventually became one of his Klan portraits. I liken this kind of sequentiality to the mind of an animator, especially those animators who work in clay and stop motion. Bruce Bickford, the official animator of Frank Zappa, comes to mind. Sometimes the forms of Guston's late work contradict themselves, as they are at once caught in a state of becoming while asserting themselves as stupidly and defiantly solid. On the subject of transformation, I've learned how to keep my studio in flux following Guston's example. If I isolate the striped mound image from The Legend is in Trouble and flip it on its head, it can be repurposed as a giant foot in the painting Give 'Em an Inch and They'll Take a Foot. Then it can tumble back again to become a grouping of rounded vegan heads in a series of paintings that I call Fear. It feels quite natural for me to redress and reorient familiar forms in order to give them a completely different emotion. This is undoubtedly a habit I learned from Philip Guston. The ways in which I see Philip Guston echoed in my practice are numerous, and I could expound on them for hours. Again, thanks to Hauser and Wirth for allowing me this opportunity to tell but a fraction of those connections, and I thank you for listening.